Welcome participants. On behalf of Anakliyama Research Institute, Chennai and e-Teaching Tamil, I am happy to welcome you all to 11th session of RE Bioscience webinar series. I am very much proud and happy to introduce today's special guest, Dr. Neelam Mishra, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany, St. Joseph College, Bangalore, India. She completed her MSc in Botany with gold medal from Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gorakhpur University and MTech in IIT Kharagpur, and she did her PhD in Texas Tech University, USA. She has received Paston and Emma Smith Scholarship 2014 in Graduate School, Texas Tech University, USA. She also received Study Abroad Competitive Scholarship for consecutively 4 years in Texas Tech University, USA. She has research experience of more than 10 years in the field of plant genetic engineering, plant physiology, molecular biology, and medicinal plants. She also contributed to the field of science by publishing her research articles in the reputed international science journals. With this short introduction, I welcome Dr. Neelam Mishra to inspire students with her valuable presentation. Madam, stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Perumal, for your kind introduction. In spite of this unique pandemic situation, it's really great. Oh, is it? Okay, I'll just increase that. So, in spite of this unique pandemic situation, it's really great that we all are connected globally and we are learning and sharing our knowledge, right? So it's a great honor, and I feel really immense pleasure in sharing my research idea on this platform. And I would like to request all the participants to keep themselves mute at all times. And if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat box, and which will be definitely answered at the end of the presentation. So I'll be sharing my screen now. Sir, can you confirm if my screen is shared? Sir, can you confirm please if my screen is shared? Okay, okay, thank you so much. So today I'll be talking about the how to improve the abiotic stress tolerance in plants via genetic engineering. So before I actually start my topic, how to improve the tolerance, I would like to introduce about a little bit about the details of abiotic stress and a little bit of background why we are doing this research. So abiotic stress, as you all know, this accounts for all the non-living factors which are basically affecting negatively the plants, the growth and development of the plants, right? So all the non-living factors basically which are required for the growth and development of the plants are, you can say, light, water, temperature, humidity. So on the basis of what living factor is in excess or is it in suboptimal amounts, that defines that there will be different kinds of abiotic stresses that is faced by the plants. So there are different types on the basis of which non-living factor is being affected or is affecting the plants growth and development. So first of all, there is a low availability of water, or if there is a major excess of water in the field, you will see either drought or flooding stress. If there is too much of salts in the soil, you will see salt stress. Then if there is too much of temperature or too low of a temperature, you will see either heat or chilling stress. Then apart from this, there are several other abiotic stresses which affects the growth and development of plants. First one is radiation stress, then mechanical stress, which is caused by wind, and then there are chemicals. In particular, chemicals can be either macro or micronutrients or heavy metals like copper or cadmium or other kind of toxic heavy metals. So basically in my talk I'll be talking the ones which I have made it bold: the water stress, in particular drought stress, the salt stress, the temperature stress. I'll be talking both excess as well as the low temperature, that is chilling stress. So as we all know that abiotic stresses there in the plants. Plants are sessile organisms. They cannot move away when they are facing any kind of abiotic stresses. So what they need to do is they need to either acclimate or they need to either adapt, right, to make sure that they can survive and they can reproduce and they can complete their life cycle, right, without much yield penalty. So there are definitely so many responses which are displayed by the plants so as to make sure that they can survive and reproduce, though with a little bit of yield penalty. So we all know that abiotic stresses are multidimensional. They can cause the responses at all morphological, physiological, biochemical, as well as the molecular level. Since I'll be talking majorly about drought, heat, salinity, and cold, so I have just taken a picture from one of the papers that was published. So it is basically morphologically you will see the effects in the plants in terms of reduced growth. The roots and shoots in the plants will be decreased, right? The plants will be shorter in size. They will be having a reduced crop yield as a result of that, because of one of the reasons, primary reasons might be early senescence or premature senescence. Now, there are a lot of physiological responses that will be shown by the plants as a result of this abiotic stresses. They will be not be able to uptake water, right? Or there will be whatever water is being uptake, it is not efficiently being utilized to produce the food. So it basically it will be having reduced photochemical efficiency, then altered transpiration, then decreased or reduced nitrogen assimilation, and also metabolic constituents will be accumulated in a high concentration or the metabolic activity will be decreasing. Now, apart from all the physiological and morphological responses, there are some biochemical responses also in the plants as a result of abiotic stresses. The plants will show an increased amount of ABA, which is the one of the major stress hormone that you will see throughout my talk. Then there are certain biochemicals like osmoprotectants like proline, mannitol. They will be increasing in size. Increasing in the amounts, so that the plants can basically tolerate that osmotic stress that is happening inside their cells. Apart from the biochemical effects, there will be so many molecular responses which will be there in the plants, right? Due to drought stress, what will happen is the gene expression will be altered. I mean to say that several genes will be upregulated and downregulated due to drought stress or heat or salt or cold stresses. So that also needs to be looked on. And so many enzymes or proteins will be synthesized, some will be degraded. So all these kind of are the basic responses that you see in the plants due to the abiotic stresses. So as we all know that it's basically abiotic stresses is basically affecting the homeostasis in the plant. So all these responses are basically affecting the plants to perform at an homeostasis level, right? Move on to the next slide. As we all know that pictures speak louder than words, so that's why I put some pictures here. The first picture is, it's taken from one of the land in China. It's basically the excess overuse of fertilizers. They have made these salts to even come out of the soil, and now that soil is no longer good to grow crop plants. The second picture I show you here is taken from somewhere in Maharashtra. Because of the heat stress, what happened is the plants, they have almost died. They are dried, all the chlorophyll has gone, the photosynthesis has gone, and also the yield. Some of the plants are, because of that, some of the plants are dead also. The last one is the drought stress. This picture is taken from the recent drought that happened in Maharashtra several years ago. So what happened is, because of that low availability of water, the soils were completely cracked, and then they were not able to grow plants on that soil for few years also. So a little bit of this abiotic stress, we all know that our agriculture, doesn't matter whether it's India, US or China, it's already almost dependent on the climate. And we all know that we all are facing climate change. So abiotic stresses are basically causing more than 50% of the crop losses due to the climate changes. And we all know that 70% of the water that is available on earth is used basically for agriculture only. And it has been projected that climate change, which is basically what you will have is high temperatures over the years, and also like infrequent rainfall patterns, or maybe no rainfalls at all for several months. So it will decrease the crop yields by 20% or more by the year 2050. It has been already projected. So we all know that plant breeding is already doing its job. They are over the decades, over the last 20 years, 30 years, plant breeders are, trying to develop a variety that can survive abiotic stresses. It can be the drought, salt or heat or whatever. And but it is not sufficient enough to cope up with the crisis. We know that population is increasing at a very high pace. By the year 2050 will be almost increasing at a very faster pace. So we all know that so as to meet the increasing population demands, plant breeding approach is not sufficient enough. We need to think of something that is called as the transgenic or genetic engineering approach, right? So as to make sure that everybody in the world is properly fed and clothed. This is one of the pictures that I want to show you here. Is it was published somewhere in one of the books, that the intensity of the color here shows that what is the chance that the summer average temperature will exceed the highest temperature that is already there on the record, right? So if you see, a red color is basically there is more than 90% chance that summer average temperature will be higher than what usually it is there. And you will see on the globe itself, more than 70% of the area is depicted as red. So there is likely a chance that because of the climate change, the heat, the temperature on the earth will definitely increase. Whatever summers we have now, definitely after 50 years down the line, it will be, the temperatures will be even much higher. Now, what was our approach, right? This was basically the background why we wanted to do this kind of research. So we wanted to improve the abiotic stress tolerances in plants, and our approach was basically the genetic engineering approach. How we used to go about it is, we used to select a gene of interest and then clone it. Either we used to clone it by ourselves, or we used to get the clone from our collaborators, right? So we used to get the E. coli clone. Then after that, we used to transform this the clone into the agrobacterium by freeze thaw method. And then we used to transform the plants with the agrobacterium mediated gene transformation. We use that indirect approach, not the direct one. We use the agrobacterium mediated gene transformation. And then once we get our transgenic plants, we used to analyze it at the molecular level, right? Which means we used to see whether the genes are present in the transgenic plants or not, whether the gene of interest that we try to insert is there in the transgenic plants or not. So we used to do it by PCR. Then the second thing we used to do is, we used to see whether that gene, whether it's there, but whether it's properly expressed at RNA level or not. So for that, we used to do Northern blot. I'll be showing you some of my results. Northern blot and real time, and also sometimes reverse transcriptase PCR. Also, in some cases, if it's an enzyme that we cloned it or any protein that we cloned it, we also used to see whether that is expressed at the protein level or not by using the Western blot analysis. After confirming that our gene is there in our transgenic plants and it is expressing both at the RNA as well as the protein level, we used to see whether it's performing better in the greenhouse and in the controlled chamber conditions. So we used to provide the control conditions, the optimal ones that actually the plant needs for their growth and development. And we used to also provide them with these stress conditions. And that is possible in the greenhouse with all those kind of control things. So we used to do that, and we used to analyze all the physiological parameters like relative water content, or photosynthesis, or transpiration, or stomatal conductance, or several biochemicals. We used to extract the biochemicals, and we used to do the assays, and all those kind of things we used to do. The last thing was, we used to see whether some of the genes which are already been known to involved in the abiotic stress responses, whether they are upregulated in our transgenic plants or not. And by doing so, we were able to kind of provide a model that how our gene will be affecting, or how our gene is able to improve the stress tolerances in plants. And then lastly, which is definitely required for any kind of crop plant, is we used to go for a field trial. And field trial, we used to do it for at least consecutively 2 to 3 years and make sure that whatever our plants are performing in the lab or in the chamber conditions, it is basically, whatever we are performing, it's basically doing the same thing in the real world itself, right? So this was our approach for creating and analyzing transgenic plants. So I was working in Dr. Hong Zhang's lab in Texas Tech University, and our lab was basically focused around creating, doing all these things only in the last 10 years or 6 years of my PhD. Actually, I was doing all these things only. So definitely there are so many genes that that are already available in literature that have been proven to improve the abiotic stress tolerances in plants. But the genes I'll be showing you in my subsequent slides is the one that I have worked on and I have published my research. So those are really promising in terms of greenhouse trials as well as in terms of this field trials. So there are several genes that I have worked on is AVP1, IPT, NHX1, SOS1, CIS1, PP2A, C5, RCA, and AKR2A. So what I will be doing is in my subsequent slides, I'll be talking about the gene, what this gene stands for, what it does, and then what is its mechanism of action, how does it improves the abiotic stress tolerances, and then I'll be sharing with you what we did in our research and how we published our papers. What was our research? And our lab was basically, it was working on the model plant Arabidopsis. We used to introduce all these genes first into Arabidopsis because it is easy to transform and it's easy to see the results. It's very quick to see the results. In a couple of months, you'll be able to, get the transgenic plants and also analyze those. And once that proof of concept is done, we used to transform our crop plants. The major two crop plants that I have worked on is peanut and cotton plants. So my next subsequent slides will be about each genes. So first of all, I want to talk about AVP1. This was one of the most promising gene that we have ever seen in improving the drought as well as salt stress tolerances. As we all know that abiotic stresses will never come alone. So we always wanted a gene that can confer the, more than multiple stresses, stress tolerances at the same time. So this is one of the genes, one such gene that can confer multiple stress tolerances at a single time. So AVP1. AVP1 is an acronym for Arabidopsis vacuolar pyrophosphatase, right? So this gene is basically, this pump is located on the membrane of the vacuole that is called as tonoplast. And if you can see this picture, this is located on the membrane of the vacuole, and it utilizes the energy of the hydrolysis of the inorganic pyrophosphate. The hydrolysis of the inorganic pyrophosphate to orthophosphate, what will happen is it will create an electrochemical gradient of H plus ions inside the vacuole. So what will happen is, as a result of AVP, right, the concentration of H plus ions in the cytosol will decrease. However, the concentration of H plus ions or protons will increase in the vacuole. So can we say this one is an vacuolar acidification kind of process, right? So this is one of the genes that we have used for, and this proton pump is definitely, it's not energized by ATP. This is energized by inorganic pyrophosphate. That needs to be kept in mind. Now, this gene has been basically proven to be very effective in improving both drought and salt stress tolerance. The next slide will be looking at how it improves the drought and stress tolerance. This is just a pump, right? An AVP gene, it's an endogenous gene, is there in every plant, right? We just try to overexpress this gene. We are taking it from Arabidopsis, putting it into peanut or cotton plants and overexpressing this AVP1. So you will have more and more of H plus ions inside the vacuole. So vacuole will be very much acidic in your transgenic plants as compared to those of your wild type plants which do not have that transgene. So what are the roles of AVP1? How this AVP1 is improving the salt stress tolerance? As I told you, because of the hydrolysis of the inorganic pyrophosphate, the proton is being pumped inside the vacuole. An electrochemical gradient is established for H plus ions. This will basically, what it will do is, it will drive the sequestering of sodium ions, and this is another pump that is situated on the vacuolar membrane. It is called as ATNHX1, that I'll be talking later in my talk. So it's basically, this is an antiporter which transports the H plus ions, and at the same time it sequesters these sodium ions inside the vacuole. We all know that, all the plant cells, inside the plant cells or inside the cellular compartments, that, that redistribution of ions or reducing sugars and amino acids, that always takes place, right? So as to make sure that the concentration of the ions and sugars or amino acids or any biomolecules is maintained properly. So here, by doing so, what we are doing is, this AVP1 is directly affecting this sodium proton antiporter. So more and more protons are there inside the vacuole, that will drive this antiporter to import more and more of sodium ions inside the vacuole, right? As we all know that salinity, if we consider sodium chloride, it's the most harmful, salt that might be present in the soil. So sodium ions are really toxic, right? They can disturb the enzymes which are there in the cytosol. So if we can make a transgenic plant that can overexpress AVP1, so that overexpression plant will be able to sequester more and more of sodium ions inside the vacuole, due to which the toxicity of the sodium ions inside the cytosol will decrease. In the cytosol will decrease. However, all the sodium ions will be sequestered, which is the toxic ones, will be sequestered inside the vacuole, right? So as a result of this, what will happen is, no matter you can grow the plants in higher saline soils, what will happen is, these sodium ions, when they come in the cytosol, because of the overexpression of AVP1, it will drive the expression of, it will drive the import of this Na plus ions inside the vacuole. So plants can basically grow better in the saline soils because they can sequester sodium ions better than the wild type plants. So this is the first picture that I shown you, is telling you how these plants are improving the salt stress tolerances. Second picture shows how the AVP1 is involved in improving or regulating the drought stress tolerance. So AVP1 is basically present on the vacuole, and then it somehow it affects the H plus ATPase, which is present on the plasma membrane. So if you have more and more of AVP1, the expression of H plus ATPase, which is another pump that is driven by the hydrolysis of ATP, it will make sure that H plus ions will come out in the apoplast. So apoplastic pH will be decreased. Because of the decrease in the apoplastic pH, the auxins, IAA, it's indole acetic acid, it's one of the auxins, they get protonated, right? And then their movement is basically increased, right, because of their protonation. So these protonated auxins, they will come inside the cytosol, and with the help of PIN1 transporters, they have also shown that this overexpression of AVP, it somehow impacts this PIN1 transporters. So these are nothing, these are the auxin transporters, which basically directs the polar auxin transports and is responsible for increased root growth inside the plants. That's what we need in terms when we have a low water in around the plants. We want the plants to grow longer and profuse root system so that they can search for water deep inside the water table, right? So this is the way that AVP is improving the drought stress tolerances in the plants. Now the second one, AVP is also involved in so many other kind of pathways. So there are several metabolic reactions which are happening inside the plants, is like synthesis of DNA or all those kind of nucleic acids or carbohydrates. They generate inorganic pyrophosphate, right? So all these reactions are generating the inorganic pyrophosphates. They are generating the inorganic pyrophosphates as a byproduct. What AVP1 does is basically it is removing whatever is generated by these processes. This AVP1 is removing that inorganic pyrophosphate and converting it into orthophosphate. So why this AVP1 is helping, or how it is helping, is if it is not utilizing this PPI or inorganic pyrophosphate, this might act as an inhibitor for various metabolic reactions, right? Feedback inhibition, if you remember, right? So inorganic pyrophosphate, if they are in larger amounts, the metabolic reactions will be kind of decreased or reduced. And also it enhances the gluconeogenesis, which is one of the pathways that utilizes PPI. So in some ways, it is basically promoting all the metabolic activities inside the plants. The last one is it mediates the sucrose phloem loading, right, which is definitely required to maintain the source and sink relationships. So as you all can see that AVP1, which is here on the this H plus ATPase, it transfers this H plus ions, and then this H plus ions are basically importing, right, the sucrose with the help of sucrose proton symporters. Right, so sucrose is loaded inside the phloem companion cells, and due to which the source and sink relationships is being maintained, and from the leaves the the metabolites or the sucrose which is being synthesized is transferred to the roots, and that's how that increased root growth is happening. At the same time, because of that acidification of this H plus ATPase, the acidification of the rhizosphere happens, right? Because of the acidification of rhizosphere, the roots, the nutrients which are present in the soil, in the water, they will be properly mobilized, right? So these are various roles of the AVP in drought and salt stress tolerances, or in different kind of abiotic stress tolerances, right? So what we thought is this AVP1, it's been last 20 years, most of the people have worked on first research. It was done on tomato, and it was a very good paper. It was published in PNAS. So what we thought of is, we thought of introducing this AVP1 into peanut. And we published this paper in Plant Biotech Reports back in 2013. And what we did is we produced our transgenic peanut plants overexpressing the Arabidopsis gene, bacular pyrophosphatase, and we tried to see whether this peanut is having improved, or whether it can outperform in field conditions under drought and salt stress conditions. So I'll show you some of my results. All the results cannot be shared here, but you can always go through my papers and see the results. But some major results I'll be showing you here. What is the performance of transgenic plants under abiotic stress conditions? As we all know that peanut still is number 5 of, ranks number 5 in the major oilseed crops that we have. And then China, India, and US, these are the major 3 peanut producing countries, right? But all these 3 countries are facing this issue of drought and salt. Because of the drought and salt, the crop yield is very less. That's what our idea was, to improve the the yield of peanut by introducing this AVP1 gene. So we produced our transgenic plants, and then we tested them under abiotic stress conditions, under normal conditions, which is very important for any kind of transgenic research. Under normal conditions, these plants should not perform different than the wild type plants. Otherwise, you have to take a relative approach. However, under normal conditions, our transgenic plants were performing the same as the wild type plants. But when we expose them to the abiotic stress conditions like drought or salt, what we found is the wild type variety, in which there was no transgene, there was a significant reduction in the shoot weight as well as the root weight, both dry and fresh. Also, we measured some physiological parameters. In the senses, we measured the photosynthesis. We also tried to measure the stomatal conductance. We found that our transgenic plants, the conductance was much higher. They were having higher transpiration, but at the same time, they were having higher photosynthesis as well. And there was a significant increase in the photosynthesis in terms of as compared to that of wild type plants. NT here stands for null transgenic in the senses these plants, they were created from the tissue culture. When until we get the homozygous plants, we screen our transgenic plants. So whatever seeds we get, we always screen, and then whichever is coming out non-transgenic from there is basically referred to as null or non-transgenic. That is what is NT, or in my full talk you'll be seeing this picture, that wild type and SNT, and then these are 1, 2, 4, 6 is basically nothing. These numbers, they represent the independent transgenic lines that is having the AVP gene. Also, as we know that this is an oilseed crop, so we wanted to make sure that our transgenic plants, whether there is an the fatty acid content or the oil content of the plant, whether it is decreased or increased, or whether there is a major change, what we found is there was not significant increase as well as there was not significant decrease also. So the quality and the nutrition of the peanut was exactly the same as the wild type plants. Also, we did our field trial in the low irrigation or just the rain-fed, plots. We did it for consecutively for 2 years, and we found that all the transgenic lines, independent transgenic lines, they always performed better than the wild-type plants in terms of yield of the peanut, right? So, how much grams of peanut we are obtaining per plant, we tabulate that, and then for around in a plot of around we had around say around 250 or 300 plants, and we used to do that, how much grams of peanut we obtained for per plant. So what we found is definitely this AVP gene is very much promising in terms of it improves the, definitely it is not performing the way the peanut should perform in a normal condition. Yield penalty is always there because you are providing stress, you are giving stress to the plant, but the yield penalty is much less in the transgenic plants as compared to those of wild type plants. Having seen that this AVP1 is performing very nicely in the peanut plants, though I was not directly involved in this project, our lab also introduced this AVP1 into the cotton plants, and they have found the similar results in the cotton plant as well. So the first picture is basically they grow the plants under salt stress conditions. You can see wild type plants a little smaller, they are paler also. However, the last 2 rows are basically the transgenic plants that we grew in the greenhouse. They are bigger in terms of their shoot weight, the leaf size, the green part of the leaf is also more. And in terms of root also, they were much bigger under salt stress. In drought stress, what we saw is they are having bigger roots, longer roots as compared to those of wild type and segregating non-transgenic plants, which is referred to as SNT. Though I was not directly the part of this research, but since I was in the lab, so I just want to show this paper also was published in a very reputed journal, Plant Biotech Journal, back in 2011. And they found similar results here also. The shoot weight, fresh as well as the dry one, is increased, and the bole number in the plants, which is shown here, it was significantly high. The numbers show the independent transgenic lines, and the bole number was high, and also the fiber yield was, because cotton is major fiber crop, right? So the fiber yield was also significantly higher in transgenic lines. Now the second gene I want you to take you is the IPT gene. IPT stands for isopentenyl transferase. And this gene that we have used in our research came from Agrobacterium tumefaciens, which is basically a natural genetic engineer. It can basically naturally infect the plants, right? So what this IPT does, this is an enzyme that is basically involved in the cytokinin biosynthesis. It's a rate limiting enzyme in cytokinin biosynthesis. This is the picture I have shown you here. This is the Arabidopsis IPT. This follows this pathway to synthesize the transzeatin, which is one of the cytokinins. And this agrobacterial IPT, however, it takes a shorter pathway and converts the diphosphate to monophosphate, and then consequently that transzeatin is being synthesized. So it's basically an enzyme that is involved in the cytokinin biosynthesis. As we all know that what is the role of cytokinin is, we all know that plants, they undergo that's genetic programming. Whenever they are under stress, that genetic programming of senescence and death is being accelerated, right? So either you can have two different kind of approaches. You can either overcome or suppress that senescence that is happening, which can be done with the help of this cytokinin. Cytokinin is a hormone. It basically delays the senescence, premature senescence it will delay. Or other approaches, basically you can study all the epigenetic mechanisms which are there, and you can study all the genes which are involved in the early transition from vegetative to the reproductive stage, and basically use that knowledge to avert or to basically divert the plants from early transition to flowering, right? So what we did is this IPT plants, what is the mechanism of action? I'll just brief you here how it works in the plants. So as we all know that cytokinin, under normal conditions, what will happen is the cytokinin, the balance of cytokinin is maintained because of these two enzymes. IPT is involved in the synthesis of cytokinin, biosynthesis of cytokinin. However, CKX, which stands for cytokinin oxidase, it is responsible for the degradation of a cytokinin. In a normal plant, the balance is being maintained, however, under optimal conditions. However, under abiotic stress conditions, what will happen is the CKX, under osmotic stress or any kind of abiotic stresses, this expression or the enzyme activity of this CKX will increase, right? So what will happen is cytokinin will be basically, the high amounts of cytokinin will not be there, and there will be decreased amount of cytokinin. Normally cytokinin, what it does is basically it's a antagonistic to ABA or other kind of hormones. It basically, what it does it induces if there is high amounts of cytokinin, if there is you know high amounts of cytokinin because of less amounts of CKX, what will happen is high amounts of cytokinin will repress the ABA, ethylene or reactive oxygen species production. That's what we want, right? So what we'll do is we will overexpress IPT so as to counterbalance the effects of CKX, right? CKX is inducing ethylene, ABA and ROS. What we'll do is we'll try to repress the synthesis of ABA, ethylene and ROS. In doing so, what we'll do is, if we are repressing the synthesis or biosynthesis of ethylene, the nutrient will be mobilized at a greater rate, right? Improvement of source and sink relationships will happen, and then the senescence will be delayed. That's how we can basically delay the senescence, and we can make sure that plant can complete its life cycle, and even though yield penalty is there, we'll get something out of it and we'll get some crop yield, even though at reduced levels, but at least something is better than nothing. Then the other thing is it will reduce the amounts of ABA. So all the ABA induced events, which is basically the ABA is there, it will decrease the the opening of these stomata. It will cause these stomata to close. It will decrease the photosynthesis. So if you increase cytokinin, all the ABA induced events will be suppressed. So you will somehow be able to maintain for a period of time, you will be able to maintain the photosynthetic efficiency of the plants. Also, it will repress the reactive oxygen species. How it will repress the reactive oxygen species is, it will basically improve the activity of several antioxidant enzymes like peroxidase or superoxidase or catalase, all those kind of superoxide dismutase, all these kind of enzymes, the improved activity will happen, right? So this IPT is making sure that cytokinin levels are high, but at the same time we want to make sure that since it's a hormone, this level should not be high at all times. It should be regulated. So we wanted to express this gene, but in a regulated manner. So that's why what we did is we express this gene under the control of a water deficit and senescence associated promoter. Sorry for the inconvenience, participants. So I was talking about this slide is IPT is how it basically improves the drought stress tolerances in plants. So the gist of this slide is basically it delays the senescence and somehow it tries to maintain the photosynthesis in the transgenic plants where you have IPT overexpression. So this paper we tried to publish the IPT. I told you is since it's a hormone biosynthesis enzyme, we wanted a regulated control. So we used a promoter that was inducible only under water deficit conditions, and we tried to express this IPT gene and improve the drought tolerance in cotton. It was published in PLOS One. Another paper we published is the timing when you are giving the drought is also important in deciding that how much yield penalty will happen. So that was another paper that we published in Scientific Reports. So I was talking about this. We did, first of all, so many experiments were done to test the performance of transgenic plants. Few experiments I'll be showing you here. This is the detached leaf senescence assay, where we are trying to show that these IPT2569s with independent transgenic lines, they are able to maintain the chlorophyll content. The degradation of chlorophyll is much lesser as compared to those of wild type plants. Also, the chlorophyll content was measured in situ as well as after detaching the leaves. So it was measured and it was found that under normal conditions they look the same. However, under drought conditions, the chlorophyll content is increased in transgenic plants as compared to those of wild type plants. When we look into the greenhouse plants, under normal conditions, they almost look the same. However, under drought stress conditions, you can see the wild type plants, which are shown by 3 pots here, they look smaller. Also, the number of bolls, cotton bolls on the plant were much lesser in wild type as compared to those of transgenic plants. The number of flowers, number of bolls, the fiber yield, as well as the roots. As you can see here, wild type plants, the roots were much smaller and less profuse. However, the transgenic plants, the roots were much bigger and profusely branched. Also, we tried to see whether the photosynthesis is being maintained in the transgenic plants which are having higher rate of biosynthesis of cytokinin. So what we did is, yes, we found the photosynthesis was much better in the transgenic lines, all the 4 transgenic lines, as compared to those of wild type and segregating non-transgenic plants. However, we find that this photosynthesis is not because of the VC max. VC max is basically the carboxylation efficiency, the rate of carboxylation in the plants. So that is not being affected because it was same. VC max was same in all the lines. However, electron transport, the rate of electron transport was higher, maybe because of the photosynthetic machinery is being protected by the increased synthesis of this cytokinin. Also, we did the field trials and we found the same thing is we had better fresh root weight. Also, cotton yield was much higher, boll numbers were much higher per plant in all the transgenic lines. And we did this field trial for consecutively say around 2 to 3 years, and we found the consecutively the same kind of results with improved drought stress tolerances. The next gene I would like to talk about is my research that I did in my PhD is the gene called as SIZE1 or CIS1. This gene is basically responsible in a process. It is involved in a process called as sumoylation. This sumoylation is nothing, it's a post-translational modification. Here what happens is sumo stands for small ubiquitin like modifier. So this sumo is attached to the target proteins, and this attachment of sumo to the target proteins, it happens through a series of enzymatic reactions. The first one is the activation, which is shown here in the purple box, the activation enzyme. The second one is the sumo is conjugated with the help of sumo conjugative enzyme. The third one is the E3, which is the one that the gene that I used, CIS1. So it is the sumo E3 ligase. This basically catalyzes the last step of sumolation, where the sumo is attached to the target proteins. Okay. So in next slides, I'll tell you how that protein attaching sumo to the target proteins is basically doing all the miracles in terms of abiotic stress tolerances. So sumo, when it is attached to the target proteins, those target proteins are properly localized to their, destination, proper destination. Their enzyme activity is being improved, and also the protein-protein interactions are getting improved. and that's how the changes or the modulation or regulation of protein activity occurs, which basically is responsible for regulating the abiotic stress tolerances in plants, and that's how the overall growth and the development and the productivity of plant is increased. So this gene, I'll tell you, it's a miraculous gene. It basically not only works in drought or salt, it works in drought, salt, heat, cold, then in mineral deficiency, heavy metal stress. So it's basically a miracle gene. So it's the one that we should be basically looking for when we are trying to raise the transgenic plants. So what I did is I expressed this gene in the Arabidopsis, and this article was published in PLOS One. That was my PhD work, and also I expressed the same gene in cotton as well. So Arabidopsis was just a proof of concept. As I told you, it's a cotton, making a transgenic cotton plant involves a lot of amount of time and, that patience and hard work. It takes about a year and a half when you get to know that whether you have transgenic cotton plants or not. So basically we try everything first in model plant, that is Arabidopsis. So the gene that I tried was from rice cis1. So cis1 is basically, it has been characterized in Arabidopsis first of all, and it has been tried for all the abiotic stress tolerances. Also it has been characterized in, now it has been characterized in Gossypium, which is cotton, and also in this tomato also it has been characterized very recently. And rice also, we got this clone from one of our collaborators in Clemson University, Dr. Hong Luo. He gave us the gene, and we cloned it in agrobacteria, and then we transformed our Arabidopsis and cotton plants with the agrobacterium harboring that gene of interest. Now we analyze the performance of Arabidopsis plants. I hope every one of you have seen the Arabidopsis plants. So these are little Arabidopsis seedlings. The first picture shows that Arabidopsis under normal temperature. However, Arabidopsis under heat stress conditions. What we do is we place the seedlings, we put the, it is done in the MS media on the plate, and we give them a little bit of heat stress. Normal temperature for growing Arabidopsis plants is around 22 to 23 degrees Celsius. But what we did is, after putting the seeds, we exposed them to 45 degrees Celsius just for 20 minutes. And what we found is there's a significant death that is seen in the wild type plants. You can see all the seedlings, or most of the seedlings of wild type plants were dead. However, most of the cis1 seedlings were able to manage and they were able to grow. However, definitely it was not as healthy as compared to that of normal conditions, but at least they were able to survive that stress period. The second picture shows that how it performs in terms of germination. We tried to see, we plated the seeds on the MS media. We put these plates in the heat stress chamber, and then we provided the conditions like 37 degrees Celsius for around 5 hours. We kept the plates there, and then we took out the plates. We found that the germination potential of the wild type seeds were greatly reduced as compared to those of transgenic plants. So that gives an idea of how the cis1 is improving the heat stress tolerances of plants. So if plants are facing a heat stress in the field conditions, that these transgenic seedlings will be able to survive as compared to those of wild type varieties. And this is the tabulated form of the data that we have done, we have reproduced this result over several times, and then we have tabulated. So there was a significant increase, as you can see, in terms of stars. Also, we tried to see whether, since this gene is a miraculous gene, works under salt stress also, so we wanted to see that whether it's basically working fine in the salt stress also. So we prepared the MS media under normal conditions without any salt. They were growing all fine. Normally there was no difference in between the wild type and transgenic plants. However, which is represented as black bars here in all the cases. However, under stressed conditions, which was salt stress. In the B picture, the salt stress was around 125 millimolar. However, the C picture, the salt stress was 150 millimolar of NaCl. So what we found is, under high salt stress conditions, all the wild type seedlings, mostly 98% of the seedlings were bleached, but here more than 80% or 90% of the seedlings were doing fine. We also reproduced the same results in the soil conditions, and what we found is definitely under normal conditions, no differences. However, under salt stress conditions, they were definitely affected because of the salt. We provided around 150 millimolar of NaCl every consecutive day, every alternate day we were providing, we were pouring it into the soil. What we found is at the end, the seed yield in the wild type plants was decreased severely. However, in the transgenic plants, the seed yield was definitely decreased, but it was not that much as compared to that of wild type plants. So they were performing definitely better than the wild type plants. Also, we tried to see by atomic absorption spectrophotometry, we tried to see how much amount of ions are being accumulated. So we found that in transgenic plant and normal conditions, they are all the same amount of sodium and potassium is being accumulated in roots and shoots. However, in transgenic plants, amount of sodium in the shoots as well as in the roots is much higher as compared to those of, much lower as compared to those of transgenic plants. The reason for this is basically what they might be doing is they are basically able to extrude, or they are able to exclude the sodium ions. They are not allowing the sodium ions inside the plant cells due to the regulation of some ion transporters, or even if the sodium ions are coming, they're able to throw it very effectively as compared to those of wild type plants. However, potassium ions, they were having higher, and as we all know that potassium ions are basically helpful in improving the growth and development of the plants. Also, we tried to see under drought stress how these plants are performing. The germination ability of the plants is definitely higher. How we provided drought stress under media conditions is we used PEG, which is polyethylene glycol, and we supplemented the MS media with PEG. That basically simulates the drought stress conditions, because PEG will hold the water and it will not allow the water to go to the seeds for germination. So what will happen is that simulation of drought stress condition will happen inside the plate. So we can see the germination is greatly inhibited in the wild type plants, but it was very much comparable in normal conditions as compared to those of the drought stress condition in transgenic plants. In the soil also, they were performing the same. After the 2 weeks of no watering, what will happen is the soils were very dry, right? They were almost, the plants were about to die. So what we were doing is, after 2 weeks of withholding the water, we watered them. What we found is more than 99% of the transgenic plants, they got recovered. They were able to flower and they were able to produce seeds also, and the seeds were, again, they were live, they were able to germinate. However, in wild type plants, mostly were dead. Even if some were surviving, the seed yield was very, very less as compared to those of transgenic plants. Now we also went ahead and checked the biochemical responses in those plants. So we measured the chlorophyll content under all different kind of stresses. We found that transgenic plants are having better chlorophyll content, then they are having better anthocyanin as well, and also better proline. Anthocyanin, I would like to tell you, this is a major antioxidant. It removes or it dissipates the reactive oxygen species. However, MDA, which is malondialdehyde, it's a marker for electrolyte leakage. If you have more of malondialdehyde, it shows, or it says that your membrane is being disrupted and your electrolytes are leaking in the environment. So the wild types were having higher malondialdehyde as compared to those of transgenic plants under all different kinds of stresses. Molecular responses of the transgenic plants, again we went ahead after we got the transgenic plants and all the responses that we went ahead and saw. We also tried to see by real-time PCR all those genes which are normally upregulated under stress conditions. What is the situation here in terms of gene expression for these genes? So RD29A, this is a gene that is responsive to desiccation. NCED, this is a gene for ABA biosynthesis, while P5CS is a gene for biosynthesis of proline. So all these genes, the expression of all these genes are highly, upregulated in transgenic plants. It was also upregulated in wild type plants because definitely wild type plants are also having a copy of cis1. Endogenous cis1 is also there in the wild type plants. You are just overexpressing that cis1. The same work, the same gene, we have done it in the cotton plants also. I have shown you just one result here. We found that the water use efficiency experiment we did, we covered the pots with the polyethylene bag, which are special plastics, which can basically allow the exchange of gases but not the water. So what we did is, after planting and providing it with the couple, saturating it with the full amount of water, what we did is we covered them with the plastic wraps, and then gases were able to exchange oxygen and CO2, and however the water was not going out. So whatever water is being evaporated is not from the soil, it's basically going through transpiration. So what we found is, after around 2 weeks, the wild type and the segregating non-transgenic plants, they were almost dead. If we don't give the water at that point of time, they will definitely die. However, all the transgenic lines, I made around 50 transgenic lines, but I selected only 4 to move ahead with the physiological performance. I found that these plants were doing miraculously better in the drought stress conditions. Also, I went ahead here also, I did some couple of real-time PCRs and tried to check whether those genes are getting overexpressed there. Yes, definitely in all the transgenic plants under all stresses, the genes are getting upregulated. And those genes were like RD29, RD22, which is response to desiccation, HSP, which is a heat shock proteins, and then this is the DREB, that is again a dehydration responsive element binding protein. So all these proteins are highly expressed in transgenic plants as compared to those of wild type plants. The next gene that I would like you to talk about is NHX1 and SOS1. NHX1, N stands for sodium, H for proton, X is for exchange. So it's again an antiporter which is present on the vacuolar membrane. And it basically is responsible to sequester sodium ions in the vacuole. If you remember my AVP1 slide, I have shown there that there's one transporter which basically sequesters, or which basically imports more and more of sodium inside the vacuole. So that is basically NHX1. Another one was SOS1. This is again an antiporter, but it is present on the plasma membrane of the plant cells. It is again a sodium and proton antiporter. This basically, the top one is basically making sure that all the toxic sodium ions are going inside the vacuole. So the cytosol is protected from the toxic effects of sodium ions. However, SOS1 makes sure that whatever sodium ions, if at all they are there in the cytosol, it will make sure that this will be extruded, or it will be exported out of the plant cells. That's how, if we are co-overexpressing these both the genes in the single plant in the same construct, what will happen is the plant will be having a greater salt tolerance. Mechanism of action I have already explained you. So this is the antiporter on the plasma membrane, which is throwing all the toxic sodium ions from the cytosol to the outside of the plant. However, this one is, if at all something is there in the cytosol, again what it will do is it will sequester those sodium ions inside the vacuole. So this was another paper that we expressed both the genes in the single construct under the constitutive expression using the constitutive promoter, and we published this in PCP using the transgenic Arabidopsis plant, and a review paper also we have published very recently. So what we found is, the only one result I'll show you here. Under normal conditions, all the plants are looking same. This is the wild type. This is the plant that is having only one gene being overexpressed. This is only one gene, which is SOS1. However, last three are the ones which are having the co-overexpression of both the genes, NHX1 and SOS1. So under normal conditions, you can see all are performing fine, or more or less the same. However, under stress conditions, which was salt in this case, only the co-overexpression lines were able to maintain properly, and they were able to produce silix at a proper rate and not at a very reduced level. The single overexpression line where only SOS1 and NHX1 is there, they were at least able to produce some silix, but the seeds that were there in the silix, later we tried for germination, they were not having any germination capability. So they were not able to germinate. However, wild type plants were not able to tolerate the salt also. Here in this case, I want to tell that the salt concentration that we used was 200 millimolar. Then, when we sent our paper to the reviewers, they said maybe the microenvironment of the pot might be affecting. So, why don't you try placing all the four different kind of plants in the same pot and provide the salt and then see how they are performing. If they are performing the same, then we can buy your paper. So, it's basically what we tried to do is we potted all the four different genotypes, which was one single wild type, single overexpression of NHX1, single overexpression of SOS1, and the double overexpression plants. We found that double overexpression plants, all the three independent transgenic lines were performing much better than the single overexpression, and definitely wild type was almost bleached without any sea leaks or seeds. So that gives an idea that definitely single overexpression gives salt tolerance, but double is definitely much better in terms of improving the salt tolerance in plants. Also, we went ahead and measured the psyllic number, plant height, seed weight, and in all the cases, we found that under normal conditions, it was fine. But under salt stress condition or heat stress conditions, they were performing much better than the transgenic plants. Here also we went ahead and measured the sodium and the chloride content and the potassium content. Again by AAS, atomic absorption spectrophotometry, what we found is the sodium content in the AT-NHX1 plant was much higher. However, others were almost same or little bit higher in case of the co-overexpression plants. The reason can be again the same. If you have more of sodium ions, basically what you are doing is you are sequestering the sodium ions inside the vacuoles. But if you are seeing less of sodium ions, basically you are able to export more of sodium ions out of the plant cell with the help of that plasma membrane transporter that is present. Then chloride content and the potassium content also, but there was not much significant differences that were observed in single and the double transgenic lines. The next gene that I would like to talk about is the PP2AC5. This was the gene that we owned. Other genes that I have told you is we got the clones from our collaborators. It was from UC Davis or from Clemson University and one from other places. But this one is the one that we only cloned. So PP2A is basically a trimeric protein. It stands for protein phosphatase 2A. This gene we used it from the Arabidopsis plants. It's a heterotrimeric protein. It's basically a holoenzyme consisting of basically three different type of subunits: A, B, and C. A and B are basically regulatory subunits, while C is a catalytic subunit. And there are not only one. It's a multi subunit proteins. So it's basically a serine threonine protein phosphatase family, and C5 is one of the 5 catalytic subunits that it has. And how it works is it improves the salt tolerance in the plants. What is the mechanism of action? This is the PP2A protein, A, B, and C5. There are so many A's, so many B's, and so many C5. Still the work is going on to find out which A and which B this C5 is interacting with. But we were not able to find out at that point of time which A and which B, but at least we were able to find out that why the plants are having improved salt tolerance. It is because it is able to upregulate a chloride channel that is present on the vacuolar membrane. We did Yeast-2 hybrid assay and BIFC assays and all those things. We tried to see that whether this protein is interacting with this chloride channel or not. And we found the positive results. Yes, it interacts, and in a positive manner. It upregulates. This is nothing. It's basically a channel that exports the H plus ions outside, and in the cytosol increases the concentration of protons in the cytoplasm. However, it basically sequesters the chloride ions. As you all know, NaCl is basically that salinity is caused by sodium as well as the chloride ions. So it's basically improving the salt tolerance by sequestering more and more amount of chloride ions in the vacuole, right? So that's how it improves the salt tolerance. And this is basically driven by AVP1, which is on the vacuolar membrane. It is importing the H plus ions in the vacuole, that is driving the import of chloride ions in the vacuole by CLCC. So this paper was again published in Plant Science back in 2018. And what we did is we, instead of just overexpressing this PP2AC5, just to improve the salt tolerance a bit further, we overexpressed both AVP1 and C5, right, in the Arabidopsis plants. And then what we did is, this is what we do is basically we make the construct, because we only clone this gene under the control of 35S promoter, and AVP1 gene also was under the control of dual 35S promoter. We used kanamycin as a selection marker. This construct was used to transform the agrobacteria. Then agrobacteria was used to transform the plants. The B picture shows the northern blot, and we had so many independent transgenic lines. Out of those, around 10 or around 12 transgenic lines were showing a higher expression of the gene. Then we went ahead and we did the real-time PCR also, and we found that all the transgenic lines were consistently having higher expression of AVP1 also and PP2AC5 also. Out of all the independent transgenic lines that we created, we chose only 3, 27, 52, and 76 for the further physiological experiments. We did the experiments. What we found is, under salt stress conditions, it's basically a gene that improves the salt stress tolerance. We found that under normal conditions, they look the same before starting the stress also. After stress also, without any stress, they look the same. However, under salt stress conditions, you can see only the ones which is labeled as AC1, they are performing much better. They were all done in the same pot. We were giving lot of salts, around 200 millimolar of NaCl, and we found that the ones that are expressing both the genes are much better in terms of the plant height, in terms of number of calyx, and in terms of the yield, seed yield of the Arabidopsis. So they were performing much better in transgenic in the salt stress conditions. We also went ahead and measured the sodium ions, potassium ions, and the chloride ions. And what we found is, under salt stress conditions, in the normal conditions, everything looks the same. They are all able to sequester, all able to extrude the sodium, potassium, and chloride ions equally well as compared to those of wild type plants. However, under salt stress conditions, these transgenic lines, they are having higher amount of sodium, which might be the reason that they are sequestering lot of sodium ions inside their vacuoles, right? Then they also found that they are having higher amount of chloride content, because ATCl-CC is getting overexpressed there. So sodium ions are also being sequestered, chloride ions are also being sequestered, and the potassium content also was little bit much higher. Maybe because of the AVP content, right? In the AVP, what happens is they are increasing the root growth and they are doing the rhizosphere acidification. So that's why what is happening is the plants are able to take up the minerals which are there in the soil. That's why the content of potassium is also very high. The next gene I would like to talk about is the temperature stress gene called as RCA. Right? I'm sorry about little, because of that inconvenience, we have to, extend the time, but please bear with me for another 15 to 20 minutes. So RCA stands for Rubisco activase. This gene, we used it from a desert shrub called as creosote. The scientific name is, I think it's Laria tridenta. Then this gene was taken from the desert shrub that was growing in Arizona. Arizona, you all know that it's like exposed to in summers are very high, very dry, and very high temperatures are there in that Arizona. So in that place, this kind of plant grows, and from there, that Rubisco activase we have cloned, right? We have taken, and this gene again, it came from one of our collaborators. So mechanism of action is basically, we all know that under high temperatures, the major problem is the photosynthesis will be inhibited. Right? So Rubisco is the major enzyme, the most abundant enzyme. It's made up of 8 small and 8 large subunits. It's basically responsible for the carboxylation of the carboxylation efficiency of the plants. So it's the major enzyme. So this enzyme is basically very susceptible to high temperatures. The reason not being this enzyme is basically the enzyme that is activating the Rubisco is very susceptible to high temperatures. I'll show you here one of the mechanisms, how it basically happens. So as you can see, Rubisco, only when you have carbamylation. That means only when CO2 and magnesium is there and then RUBP binds, then only that product will be formed, which is phosphoglyceric acid, and then the complex will open, right? However, under heat stress conditions, what happens is very likely you will end up is the RUPP will go and join the Rubisco without without the active site being carbamylated by CO2 and magnesium. So RUBP will go and join and it will form a dead end complex. Once the RUBP is joined, there is that Rubisco is inactivated. It cannot be activated further. Or what will happen is, instead of RUBP joining, some inhibitors like substrate analogs of RUBP like CA1P, and this is some carboxyarabinitol and ketoarabinitol phosphatase. So these are all the substrate analogs. They will go and join instead of RUBP, and that will result in the formation of dead end complexes, right? So what will happen is, under high temperatures, if you do not have a Rubisco activase, what it will make sure that the CO2 and Mg is there, and then RUBP joins, and the formation of dead end complexes is decreased. And even if they are there, there is this Rubisco activase, with the help of ATP, it is able to remove all these substrate analogs from the active site of the enzyme. If Rubisco activase, which is very susceptible to high temperatures, it is inactive, right? What will happen is, these substrate analogs, which otherwise will be binding on the active site, will be binding there, and then the photosynthesis will be inhibited. So as to make sure that Rubisco is active at all times, Rubisco activase has to be activated all the times. So Rubisco activase is basically a key in keeping the Rubisco active in the chloroplast under heat stress conditions. So this paper again we have published very recently, a few months back, and here we try to overexpress RCA and AVP. Every paper now we have published is basically we are doing the co-overexpression. Since I already told you, these stresses, they always come in combination, they never come alone, right? So we have expressed here RCA and AVP both, and we have expressed it in Arabidopsis. And what we found is, the Arabidopsis is doing much better under heat stress condition in terms of the root length, in terms of the seed number, plant height, seed weight, everything. Also, what we tried to do is, we tried to give a combination of stresses in the greenhouse conditions. We gave drought, salt, as well as heat. And we found that single overexpression plants, which is depicted here as A, expressing only AVP, or expressing only RCA. However, all these are expressing AVP as well as RCA. So they are consistently performing better in terms of plant height, seed weight, number of calyx, all those kind of things. So this was really a promising work, and RCA has already been used in several plants like tomato and all other plants. And this was our approach in using this RCA in Arabidopsis. Now we have already cloned it in cotton plants, and we are trying it in the fields. I mean, I'm not a part of this, but whatever I could do until when I was there, I did, and now my other colleagues are doing the work. The last gene I want to take you through is the AKR2A, which I would say is the best paper that I have ever got. The AKR2A stands for ankyrin repeat containing protein, and it comes from Arabidopsis. So ankyrin repeat containing protein, this protein is basically a molecular chaperone. Chaperone, as we all know, what it does, it basically does two things. It prevents the aggregation of the proteins, it prevents the misfolding of the proteins, or another thing, it sends the protein to the correct location, right? If it is at the correct location, it can basically do all the functions. So how it does is, this AKR2A, it improves the chilling stress tolerances in plants. As we all know that when we are talking about chilling stress, there's something that the membrane of the plants is having a problem, right? Whenever they are exposed to very low temperature, the integrity of membranes is getting lost, right? The membranes are no longer fluid, right? The percentage of unsaturated fatty acids, if they are more, they will keep the membranes fluid, right? And or other than unsaturated fatty acids, we have another thing that we have explored here is the percentage of very long chain fatty acids. So this AKR2A, it interacts with a protein called as KCS1. This is keto-acyl coenzyme A synthase. This enzyme is a part of a fatty acid elongase complex, and this is involved in the synthesis of VLCFA, which is very long chain fatty acids. As you all know, that improving the content of unsaturated fatty acids or very long chain fatty acids will somehow improve the integrity of the membrane under cold stress conditions, and thus the plants will be having improved chilling stress tolerances. So this paper was also recently published, my most recent paper that is published in a very reputed journal called as Plant Journal. And here we try to see that what is the mechanism of action that was done. I mean, after all the experiments that we did, we try to find out that what is the mechanism of action that this gene is having. This gene, right, this AKR2A and KCS1, they both are interacting, right? This is a molecular chaperone, it interacts with KCS1. Both these genes are having CBF, right? It means C repeat binding factor. They are having a putative CBF element in their gene sequence. So CBF can go and bind, and then what will happen is all the cold stress responses will happen. And then because of this gene being interacting with each other, this is a fatty acid synthesis gene. The very long fatty acids will be synthesized, and that's how the plants will be tolerant to chilling stress. Now we tried to see, we analyzed the AKR2A promoter. We found that CBF2 sequence, there is a putative CBF2 binding element is there. We analyzed it by blast and other things. The second thing is we analyzed the expression of the AKR2A under chilling conditions. We found, we fuse the AKR2A gene with the GUS gene, and we can see that the GUS gene is overexpressed in the plants under chilling conditions. We can see an overexpression of AKR2A. Also, we did the real-time PCR, and we found that under chilling stress conditions, the AKR2A is expressed at a higher rate and higher level. However, the expression was much higher at the time of flowering, and then the expression decreases along the line. Now, also, as I told you, the basis or the mechanism of stress tolerance in here is basically how it interacts with this protein. We solved this interaction by using the Yeast-2 hybrid assay. We found that it interacts. We used several bait and several preys of KCS1 and AKR2A, and we found that Yeast-2 hybrid assay showed that this AKR2A interacts with the transmembrane domains of KCS1 gene, KCS1 protein. Then also we did the in situ analysis, try to see whether these proteins are interacting or not. So what we did is we cloned this AKR2A along with, we fused it with the N terminal of YFP, and we fused the KCS1 gene with the C terminal of YFP. When they are coming together, if they both are interacting, you will get a signal. So the bottom line is we were getting a signal, so it means these two proteins are interacting in vivo also. Then we analyze the performance of transgenic plants under abiotic stress conditions. What we found is the plates that you see here in normal conditions, they almost look the same. But if you look closely at in the stress conditions, which was chilling, the seedlings were much smaller. The magnified views is shown in the figure D. The seedlings were much smaller as compared to the ones. OA means only AKR2A is overexpressed here. Here only KCS1 is overexpressed. Here both the genes are overexpressed. So definitely it's better under chilling stress as compared to those of single and wild type plants. And also in terms of the amount of seed it could generate, it was much better. Also, we tried to find out several biochemical things like VLCFA content. We analyzed the contents, and we found in both single and double overexpression lines, the VLCFA content, very long chain fatty acids, were much higher as compared to those of Columbia, which is a wild type plant. Membrane leakage, ideally what we were expecting is, because this is providing some tolerance against the chilling stress, so we were expecting that membrane leakage should be much lower as compared to those of Columbia. and that's what we also got. The Columbia was having the highest membrane leakage. The membranes were very disrupted in Columbia, which is a wild type. However, in single and double overexpression lines, what will happen is the membranes were much, integer. Then what happened is we analyzed the chlorophyll fluorescence. What we found is the chlorophyll fluorescence is maintained in the transgenic lines. Also, we analyzed the malondialdehyde content. We found that malondialdehyde contents in the transgenic lines were much smaller. That is an indicator of electrolyte leakage. That means the membranes are much, stable in transgenic lines as compared to those of wild type plants. So that's why that malondialdehyde content is smaller in or lesser in transgenic plants. The last experiment that I want to show you here is, instead of doing the overexpression analysis, we also produce the knockout plants or the RNAi plants. And this is basically just a molecular confirmation at the gene level and also at the protein level, that whether the gene and the protein is expressed in the I stands for RNAi plants, and KCS1 is a mutant, and this is a double mutant where we do not have AKR2A as well as KCS1. What we found is, under normal conditions, they were almost the same. A little bit difference was definitely there because you don't have AKR2A gene there. However, under chilling stress conditions, this was even severe. The plants were much smaller. Even if they are there, they are basically very small. They were not able to expand their cotyledons, and they were not able to establish themselves very nicely as compared to those of wild type plants in the soil also. Same thing, we analyzed all the VLCFA, chlorophyll fluorescence, membrane leakage, and the MDA content, and whatever results we got for the overexpression plants, the opposite results here we got for the RNAi or the knockout plants. The double knockout plants were having the highest membrane leakage, highest MDA contents, all those kind of things were there. So this is basically the work that we have done till now. So that is what I have shared. Around 7 genes I have worked personally to improve the abiotic stress tolerances in plants. Also, we did the molecular analysis and we found that several genes which are involved in the fatty acid synthesis are basically upregulated or downregulated in the transgenic plants. So with this, it's just a summary of what all genes we have used here. Some of the genes are missing also here, but most of the genes which are very promising are already here. So AVP1 improves drought and salt, ATNHX1 only salt, IPT only drought, CIS1 does everything, RCA only heat, SOS1 only salt, and AKR2A, it's only again the chilling stress. So I would like to conclude my slide saying that definitely abiotic stress are major cause of concern. Since the growing population, we have to keep it fed properly and clothed properly. We need to make sure that the abiotic stresses are basically being addressed. And genetic engineering is basically has shown its capability to cope up with all those abiotic stresses. And we all know that the major advantage of genetic engineering is basically we have a larger gene pool from where the gene we can take. It can transcend across the species barrier. So basically genetic engineering, over the last 10 years, it's been increasingly used to improve the abiotic stress tolerances, and the work is continuing further, and hopefully in the near future, we'll basically see we already have some commercialized transgenic plants which are, having improved abiotic stress tolerances, but we'll see more in future. So I would like to end my slide with this quote by Dr. Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is basically most adapted to the change. It can basically most adaptable, right? With that, I would like to thank you so much for your patient listening. And I also like to thank my, research advisor, Dr. Hong Zhang, who basically helped me or made me learn and, provided me all the knowledge and all the, resources that so that I could do this beautiful research and publish so many papers. Also, I would like to thank all my colleagues that were a part of all my research papers. And I was also a part of their research papers. And last not but the least, I would like to thank AARI who gave me the platform basically to share my research interest. So I would like to end my presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir. And if any questions are there, I'm very happy to answer those. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am. Actually, there are n number of questions.
Okay.
So if I start asking, audience will get angry also. I don't know. So, but anyway,
Okay.
we'll have some
So
selective
maybe
question at least. So I already
okay.
posted the feedback link in the comment section. So whoever urgent, they can use it. So no problem. So we can continue with the
My
feedback session.
email ID, yeah, my email ID can be shared with them, and they
Yeah,
can, if there is,
yeah,
yeah,
we can surely.
they can.
So
Uh,
actually, we have a Telegram channel. So in that, if you join, all the updates will be given. So madam's email ID also will post it there. So you can make use
mhm,
of it. You can interact
mhm,
with her. So now I can start the question session. So
mhm.
there is a one question. It's a basic question kind of like for cloning only E. coli is used. Can we use any other bacteria?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. So very nice. Yes. 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 So it's a very nice question actually. So E. coli, the reason we use is E. coli is basically it's easy to maintain. The replication time is only 20 minutes. In 20 minutes it will be doubling, and it's easy to maintain. It's easy to culture. That's why any cloning experiment we start with E. coli, then we go for agrobacterium. So that is the reason
Okay.
the E. coli is used.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So how endophytes play a role in abiotic stress tolerance?
Well, I'm not very much conversant with how endophytes are basically because I have done only the genetic engineering work. But they might be playing a role if they, secrete some chemicals or, something like. But I'm not very sure of this.
Okay, it's okay. So, what is the significance of development of such a stress tolerance within plants while a lot of research work is done on abiotic stress as it induces positive effects on phytochemical profile of a plant?
Oh, I didn't get the question. Can you repeat again, sir?
What is the significance of development of such a stress tolerance within plants while a lot of research work is done on abiotic stress as it induces positive effects on phytochemical profile? Like
You mean to say the
if a plant is in the abiotic stress condition, it produces high phytochemicals, so it is economically viable, useful. So what's the
okay?
significance of development such a stress tolerance plant? Like that's the
Okay,
question.
so okay, I understood the question. So basically, if you are looking for the phytochemicals, definitely it's good. You want your plant to be stressed, and you can have phytochemicals. But here, basically, we are looking that how we can reduce the penalty that is being done in the crop plants due to the abiotic stress. So if somehow we are improving that abiotic stress, we are producing phytochemicals fine, which can be used for say drug development and all other kind of things. But if it is a crop plant, then we need to be concerned about the productivity and yield of the crop plants. So that's why we are trying to improve specifically in crop plants to improve the yield under stress conditions. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah. So using AVP gene in excess by approaching normal condition, it may lead to excess absorption of water and causing rotting.
Causing rotony. But there are ways. There are ion transporters. If there is an excess of H plus ions, there are ways to extrude the H plus ions also out from the cytoplasm, out from the this,
So when it comes in the
the
normal condition, it will not affect the plant.
no, it will not affect. We have shown the plants under normal conditions, they look the same. If you provide excess of water, even if you have ABP1 there, they are extruding H plus ions also at the same time.
Does this gene's name contain available sequence?
I'm sorry, sir.
Like these genes, do they have sequence?
Yeah, it's already been sequenced. It's available. The Arabidopsis information can be found on the ABRC or TARE website, and NCBI also. You can look for all the this
All these
homologous
informations.
genes.
Okay.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
is the
all
role
this,
of
everything
auxin
is
in
sequenced.
abiotic stress on plants?
Auxin is basically involved in the root growth. If you know that auxin is basically involved in the this pin 1 transporters are involved in the polar auxin transport, and auxin is involved in the root development. If you have major root, longer roots or profusely branched roots under drought stress, that is what we need. We need our roots to grow longer and profusely branched, so that water, if it is not available in the vicinity of the plants, if it is available little far also, the roots can reach up there. So it's basically increasing the AVP1 is basically increasing the that availability of or the polar auxin transport. Also at the same time, it increases the acidification in the rhizosphere. So that's why all the nutrients and the water can be easily mobilized inside the plants. I hope it answers.
So, due to AVP1 introduced in plants has no disadvantages of chemical fertilizers and pesticides when sprayed over the field, as they are also kind of drugs. Like, is there any like disadvantage of chemical fertilizer or pesticides, like because the AVP introduced to plants, whether they get
No,
affected?
no. When we are doing a field trial, we are not applying any kind of fertilizers. We are just giving the normal conditions. But when we are doing a salt stress experiment, we do provide NaCl or some other kinds of salts. But when we are doing just the drought stress, we are not fertilizing the soil with any kind of fertilizers or any kind of chemicals, right? So it's basically AVP1 when we are doing drought stress experiments, no salts, no fertilizers.
Like in field, while we are doing experiment, it is okay. But when it is changes to field, like for the farmers, when they do, if they apply fertilizer or pesticides, will it make any change, any effect?
That is what has to be checked. That field trial is actually being done rigorously to bring this gene into the market. It's basically requires 10 years of rigorous field trial, and so many different locations they'll try, and with fertilizer, without fertilizer, they'll be trying, and they'll see. That work we haven't done, but I hope it doesn't make much difference.
And there is one question was many times was asked, like please mention the source of AVP1 gene.
AVP1 gene is from Arabidopsis. A stands for Arabidopsis. Yeah.
This question was asked by many.
Okay.
So, there are any transgenic rice plant present which drought tolerance, which has tolerance, like for
One I know is basically it's been commercialized by Monsanto Drought Guard. It's a maize plant, and it's already been commercialized.
they are asking
Right?
about rice plants.
Rice plants drought tolerant. It's not been commercialized yet, but still the size one itself. We are about to file a patent. Probably in a couple of years, we'll be filing a patent with this one, and we'll be uh, proceeding ahead with the commercialization and the thing. But it takes a longer time, sir. Definitely.
And Sumo 1 successfully exposed in all extreme condition in cotton plant?
Is sumo? Sorry, sir.
Is Sumo 1, SUMO 1,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
successfully exposed in all extreme conditions of cotton plant?
Yes, it has done miracles in all kind of abiotic stress conditions. It can be salt, drought, heat, cold, everything. So it basically it's sumo protein is attached to the target protein substrates in all kind of abiotic stress conditions. If you type cis1 in your Google, you will see all different kind of papers that deals with all different kind of abiotic stresses are there.
What is about salt stress induction through tissue culture?
Salt stress induction.
Through tissue culture. That's the one question.
I'm not sure what this person
Let
is
me explain.
about to ask.
Okay, since AVA is known as stress hormone and you have mentioned cytokinin as antagonist of AVA, please explain the functioning of AVA as well as cytokinin during stress.
Okay, so cytokinin is basically a hormone that is a growth promoter. It promotes the cell division. However, ABA is a stress hormone because it basically closes the stomata. It prepares the cell or the plant cell for the stress conditions. So that's why I said that word, right? So cytokinin, if there is more amount of cytokinin, what will happen is it will repress the synthesis of ABA. And more amount of cytokinin will be having less ABA in the plant cells, and that's why we'll be able to maintain photosynthesis by not doing the stomatal closure. Thank you.
Okay. And another question is like, okay. Have you tried to check the fate of transgenic lines when exposed to heavy metals? Exposed to with heavy metals.
No, we haven't done any heavy metal stress studies. But we actually, the work is currently being done now with the CIS1, since it's involved in the heavy metal stress. So it's currently being done now in Arabidopsis, but I haven't done any work with heavy metals.
That is interesting. The stress tolerance is differ from one plant to another, right? How this is
Mm-hmm.
responsible alone with the ABA and cytokinin.
Definitely, the stress tolerance depends on so many things. It depends on the severity, intensity, duration of the stress. As compared to plants, it depends on different kind of genotypes also. It might not perform the same the way it is performing in Arabidopsis and cotton, right? So that has to be looked on. It not just that what miracles it's doing in cotton, it will do the same amount of miracles in the tomato or tobacco plant. That's what has to be looked on. Every plant will be performing differently.
Okay. How IPT respond under simultaneous biotic and abiotic stress, which is quite common in nature. Since IPT suppresses ET, ABA, ROS, won't it make the crop more susceptible to biotic stress? Ma'am?
I didn't get the IPT has never been, protective under biotic stresses. I think that person is mixing the CIS1 and IPT. CIS1 is very much promising under biotic stresses. IPT is mainly for drought,
Okay.
right? Because it is decreasing the concentration of ABA, decreasing the concentration of reactive oxygen species, and also decreasing the concentration of ethylene. So it's basically involved in the abiotic stress. As far as I know, it is only involved in drought, not in biotic stress. Biotic stress, CIS1 is involved. However, because sumo is it's a universal protein, and it's universally being synthesized inside the plant cells, it can go to any target proteins. It can be either from biotic stress conditions or abiotic stress conditions. But IPT is only for abiotic, not for biotic.
Okay. So, how much evolutionary conserved the discussed genes are? How much the conserved genes or something?
I didn't get it, sir. Please say
Like
again.
how much these genes are conserved, like in evolutionary things. Are they
How much
conserved
genes
or
are
con-
concerned?
conserved?
Oh, I didn't get the
Okay,
question. How much
okay,
genes?
okay.
Oh.
Like I will check and
Mhm.
then I will later. How would you convince a farmer to go for transgenic plants over a seed primed plants which is cost effective and exhibit similar physiological potential?
Okay. The only thing we can convince is if we can show them a better crop yield under abiotic stress conditions. Just a 20-30% increase in yield, what we are getting with a single overexpression plants is not enough for the farmer to buy our seeds. We have to go for more than 60% or 70%. Then only that farmer will be thinking that the same amount of seeds, they are much costly. Definitely, the farmers will never go for a seed that is only giving 10% yield, promotion. So we have to somehow improve the yield of the plants by more than 60%. Then only the farmers will buy, definitely.
What is the
That's
experimental
what.
study of salinity in abiotic stress, ma'am?
What is the experimental
Study
study?
of salinity in abiotic stress.
Experimental study is we do it in the greenhouse, in the chamber, and also in the soil conditions. In the laboratory conditions, we use NaCl in the plate itself with along with the MS media. However, in soil, we provide the salts like NaCl in directly into the soil and allow the plants to grow. That's how we conduct the experiments. I guess that's only he's wanted to ask.
Okay. So I hope with this we can conclude the session.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I hope everyone got inspired by the lecture of Dr. Neelam Mishra and it's time for conclusion. and I request really sorry for what the mishaps happened during the session. So anyway, we have concluded it with a again comeback. So I'm so happy to deliver vote of thanks for this wonderful session. First of all, I would like to thank our special guest, Dr. Neelam Mishra, Assistant Professor, Department of Botany, St. George College, Bangalore, India, for accepting our invitation and delivering an insightful presentation. The in-depth knowledge of her in the field of plant genetic engineering has inspired all the young minds who participated in this international webinar. The abiotic stress physiology of plants being well explained by Dr. Neelam Mishra in detail, and also she very elaborately dealt the incorporation of genetic engineering in dealing the plant stresses. The best part is that she carried out the entire talk with creating awareness and exploring the field of plant genetic engineering. Not only the lecture, but also the discussion session was great with lot of questions which were well explained by the speaker. Hence, on behalf of e-teaching Tamil and Anakliyamma Research Institute, Chennai, I heartily express my sincere thanks once again to Dr. Neelam Mishra. Thank you, ma'am. We always look forward to your able guidance and support.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me the platform to share my research. Thank you so much, all the participants also.
Next, I wish to thank the wonderful participants who have turned up in such a great manner, not only from India but also from 15 different nations. Thank you so much for your cooperation, friends. The best part is that we have received 1000 registration within the 24 hours of the brochure list, and really that was a great number. Once again, I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. Without your support, we would not have succeeded this. Last but not least, I thank board of directors, scientists and other staff members of Anaklima Research Institute for continuously supporting me in organizing consecutive webinar sessions. I request all participants to visit RE website or aara.yolasite.com to know about upcoming webinar session.